Oppenheimer is based on a 721-page Pulitzer Prize-winning book about the Manhattan Project. And Barbie is on a plastic doll with big boobies.
Look, Joe, buddy, Joey, Jojo, okay? Honestly, it might have been better if you hadn't actually seen Barbie. Big boobies aside, oh my god.
Big boobies.
Barbie is a landmark movie for exploring gender dynamics in the patriarchy. And Barbie Land is the perfect case sample for discussing heteronormative gender divorced from patriarchy. It's a place devoid of class struggle and exists without racial prejudice. This allows for a strict analysis of gender roles in a society not plagued by other social tensions. And there's been a lot of discourse on this movie so far. But if we're being honest, the contributions from male critics have been, well...
This movie is not just a piece of shit. This movie is a flaming piece of dog shit piled atop an entire dumpster on fire, piled atop a landfill.
It's a doll movie. Yeah.
Let's call it lackluster. So I think it's about time we fix that. Barbie makes some of the most blatant and poignant statements about women's perspective existing and navigating a patriarchal society to date. But I think it's safe to say that the target demographic isn't discovering anything they didn't already know about the system of oppression that they live in. It's unique to see someone from a world who has never experienced sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination navigate those topics and slowly grasp the unfortunate truth of living as a secondary citizen to the ruling class. This isn't news for anyone who identifies as a woman, and I imagine there was a strong sense of visibility and catharsis from those viewers as their everyday frustrations vanished in Barbie Land. And the fight to regain that liberation was riddled with truisms of the struggle to exist as a woman in a patriarchal society. However, I don't think most men will walk into Barbie with a conscious understanding of what Ken's struggles are with the patriarchy and how he ventures to find meaning outside of Barbie. These confining roles go much deeper than the usual talking points used by men's rights activists and neoliberals to gain support from the ruling class to further strip away rights from everyone who isn't a cis, white, straight, able-bodied male. You'll see armchair film critics and political commentators talking all about the dangers of showing the disastrous state of patriarchy on a society in such a bubbly yet poignant way. But I'd like to see them actually break down what the messaging was for their gender. Because it's there. Sort of. I mean, we did get our own song and dance number near the end. Ken begins the movie quite simply, standing at the beach, waiting for Barbie to appear. We are introduced to the concept that Ken has no real existence outside of Barbie. It's very clearly stated on the box that it's Barbie and Ken. Barbie comes first in this world, and Ken exists simply as a supplemental role to further develop Barbie's already fulfilled life. Barbie can and does exist without Ken, but it's not until our main characters reach the real world where Ken begins to really exist without Barbie. Every action that Ken takes until they begin their adventure in the real world serves one of two purposes. One, to get attention from Barbie so that Ken can fulfill his purpose, and two, to fight off the other Kens who are also vying for Barbie's attention. In this simplistic world of Barbie Land, we have pointed out two crucial bits of male behavior in society. The first is to gain the attention and ultimately the affection of the person they are attracted to, who they're made for, and the second is a sense of aggression they feel towards other men. Ken, that could be seen as a threat to their survival or their primary goal. When Ken gets Barbie's attention to show her how good he is at surfing, we see that he's using his skills to show competence and success to win Barbie over. This goes over poorly since Ken is a dumb little goofball, and Ken immediately switches over to playing the part of the wounded soldier to win over Barbie's sympathies. He breaks off this semblance of an act to beach off with a rival Ken, showing that he needs to defend his territory and the person that he loves from outsiders. Ultimately, Ken succeeds in getting Barbie's attention, but only temporarily. We see these alternating actions of trying to get Barbie's attention while fighting off other Kens end at the end of the night when Barbie and Ken are alone and Ken makes a play to spend more intimate time with Barbie. Barbie, up until this point, has always viewed Ken as just a friend, not needing his companionship for her self-fulfillment, but enjoying his company in a platonic way. This doesn't compute with Ken because for all intents and purposes, his only real objective in life is to be with Barbie. He can't force Barbie to be with him, at least not yet. Foreshadowing is a narrative device. Foreshadowing is a narrative device. And he doesn't even understand why he would need to. It's just because it's Barbie and Ken, both of them together. It's always Barbie. Or it's Barbie and Ken, but it's never just Ken. I think a lot of men, more than would probably like to admit, are just as confused about this dynamic as Ken is. In this perfect world where women don't have to be defined by men, they can choose to not be with them without fear of repercussions. It's not an inherent problem with these men, though the ones who think like this probably have plenty of other reasons why women aren't interested in them. But the fact that, given the choice, women don't feel the need to be paired like this is disheartening to some who have only ever thought of women as women, and not as people. It's the perception that women are second-class individuals that are supplementary to men that makes even some purported male feminists betray their cause. Now that these guys are seeing themselves in the secondary role, they feel empathy for Ken, frustration for his situation, and even a tinge of annoyance with Barbie for not placating his needs. She doesn't need to validate those feelings. It would be nice if she acknowledged how Ken feels, but there's no reason she needs to act on them, and that concept is so foreign to most men that it probably flew right over their heads. Throughout this whole opening though, all of the Kens have autonomy. They're not forced into a subjugated role in society due to their gender. The major problem, if you could call it that, is that they've been created to be with Barbie. This fabricated need to be with her is inherent to the society in which they exist. But since Barbie Land is a matriarchal society where women are viewed as people, the Kens follow Barbie's lead in the hopes of one day winning their affections. At any time they could go do something else, but they choose not to based on the social structure in which they live. Okay, so now we know the world that Ken exists in, one that isn't really made for him, and his underlying purpose is not being fulfilled because it's dependent on how Barbie feels. Ken himself is a victim of this world because it is dictated to him that he must fulfill the role as Barbie's Ken, and if he doesn't, then something's wrong with him. He has been given an impossible task because inherently Ken and Barbie's priorities are misaligned. Sounds like another underrepresented group I know.
Interesting.
Now, what does that remind me of? Right, the closer I am to find. Closer I am to find. In a last-ditch effort to impress Barbie, Ken joins her on her quest to stop this existential dread from occurring and close the rift. And he spends the next several scenes exemplifying typical male behavior in relationships. He acts like a child, weaponizing incompetence for attention while Barbie is literally going through an existential crisis. You still listening, Joe? I want to make sure you know it's more about the perils of outward perception on women rather than cellulose. Okay? You're the one making it weird, buddy. Barbie is forced to cuddle Ken like a mother, which further distances her perception of him as both a partner and honestly as an equal. A lot of men tend to take advantage of the woman's socially appointed role as caregiver. Women are expected to clean the house, cook meals, and keep track of everyone's schedule. And now that the vast majority of couples require both partners to work for survival, the financial burden of keeping a home is also thrust upon the woman. Men just don't seem to acknowledge this fact.
I've started to get all these weirdo feelings, like I have fear with no specific object. What is that?
It's anxiety. I have it too. They're just awful at this age.
I feel amazing.
That's because kids don't take it out on the dads.
And those that do, even with good intentions, put the emotional labor on their partner by always asking them what needs to be done. These questions, while innocently posited with good intentions, don't do much to alleviate the partner's mental or emotional load. Again, I don't think most men even know how disproportionate the share of household tasks are between them and their spouses. And that doesn't just apply to relationships either. There's a clear difference between the emotional labor men extend to their friends compared to women. I think it's easy to unilaterally accuse and blame men for this behavior, but it's important to keep in mind how the patriarchy socializes boys growing up. Odds are they never experienced a deep and emotionally honest relationship with the father figure in their life, if they even had one. And especially for younger millennials and Gen Z, their mothers who had grown up during the riot girl wave of feminism had focused all of their energy on teaching their daughters to be strong, powerful, and mature women, and put no effort into teaching their sons to be empathetic, in tune with their emotions, and treat women as equals. Even this description puts the emotional labor onto mothers to educate their sons. The absence of a male parental figure, either physically, emotionally, or otherwise, is a failure on them, and shouldn't be pushed onto the mother to pick up the slack. What Ken finds while in the real world is something that shocks him to his core. He enters a world in which everything is made for him. Finally, a place that feels liberating to him because it's one built on the patriarch. He discovers an identity outside of his sole purpose of being with Barbie and chases every new and unique concept that catches his eye. horses. Working out, horses. Important jobs, and horses. Unfortunately for Ken, and the rest of Barbie Land, Ken finds refuge in the shallow, abusive, hypermasculine world of patriarchy. The first thing he says to another man in the real world is that he has his sex parts. He literally feels the societal pressure to fit in the patriarchy and decides to lie about his anatomy to fit in with other men. His newfound freedom comes at the cost of destructive and violent methods of patriarchy. A man can ignore his emotional responsibilities if he can distract himself with things like work, exercise, and horses. Gotta love those horses, am I right? Also, did you ever notice that men who love horses are like cool cowboys, but when women love horses, they're weird horse girls? Damn. Patriarchy strikes again. There's nothing inherently wrong with enjoying work or having social hobbies that allow you to connect with others. The problem occurs when these systems are set up to deny, demean, and dehumanize women for no other reason than sexism. A large reason why these sweaty incels give such laughable critiques on the movie is because they saw the core foundations of their world shaking below them. The red pill movement, alpha males, and religious conservatism that leads boys from Joe Rogan to Andrew Tate in a matter of months. They have no ground to stand on if they can't subjugate women and trans people because they provide no value outside of their born privileges. Well, I'm sure they would be thinking about that if they had any sense to comprehend the movie past women good, men bad. It's not enough for them to identify as guys who enjoy working out or career-focused men. These acts must be conflated with the subjugation of women to give a sense of success. The men who hate women the most are the men who have failed by the predetermined metrics of success. The basement-dwelling mouth breathers can't feel a sense of pride and accomplishment by being good at anything or attracting any potential mates. And I'm not just talking about the boys, am I right? Not just the mates. Am I right, boys? Boys? Am I right, boys? Boys? Yeah, the boys. Not just the boys. It doesn't take any skill or intelligence to punch down on people who are lower than them because of their gender identity. That's just an easy target. Barbie, during all of this, finds her way to Mattel and discovers the whole corporation is owned and managed by men. There's a great scene where the board members are literally trying to force Barbie into a box as a metaphor for how patriarchy tries to package women up into one-dimensional, purely physical individuals with no autonomy. Did you catch that, Joe? They put her in a box based off of her physical appearance. It's fantastic. But that's Barbie's story. We're here to talk about Ken. Barbie brings up Ken in their meeting, and the CEO blatantly doesn't care about him. Often in the conversation of patriarchy and combating it with feminism, we view it as a women's versus men issue. The men being the rich CEOs at the top of the social hierarchy, and the women being at the bottom, slowly but surely clawing their way to equality. But in reality, both genders have to collaborate to solve the issues of patriarchy. When the CEOs ignore Ken as something to worry about, it reflects how feminism often treats men as an untrustworthy ally at best, and at worst, the enemy. There's good reason not to trust men, don't get me wrong, but radical change needs to include both men and women, even if the role for men in the conversation of feminism is to sit down and listen most of the time. Joe, are you listening? It's important to have them present. Barbie has the emotional intelligence to include Ken in the conversation because she cares about both of their safety from the patriarchy of the real world. But unfortunately, Ken has already been won over for the clear benefits it gives to him, even at the expense of the Barbies. However, there's still hope for his perspective to shift. Foreshadowing. So we have a corrupted Ken race back to the rest of the Kens and enlighten them on the ways of subjugating women. And like a hack comedian at the Golden Globes, he changes Barbie Land for the worst.
Every night is boys' night.
Barbie, after going through quite a traumatic and enlightening journey of her own, makes it back to Barbie Land to discover that the Kens have taken over and forced the Barbies to be servile to them, waiting on them hand and foot, literally, and have been dehumanized to the point of actual objectification. This brainwashing, which, as an ever so slight note, felt so immediate and intense that it was kind of hard to believe. I don't want to victim blame the Barbies for being forced into literal slavery here, but these women knew the intricate political and social workings to create a near utopian society that literally crumbled at the mention of the word patriarchy. Like, I don't know, what are we trying to say with this? Are the Kens just that convincing, or are the Barbies just that stupid? Is it both? Is it neither? Something just feels a little off with that. I guess we don't need an explanation of how they were brainwashed, and the abrupt change is kind of the point, but it does make me wonder what happened. Anyway, Barbie discovers that her dream house has been turned into a Mojo Dojo casa house, and the Kens have discovered a life outside of trying to please the Barbies. Their main objective is still the same, they've just forced the Barbies to be interested in them rather than trying to be likable and autonomous people. Notably, the Kens aren't as antagonizing towards each other during this part of the movie. They've removed the source of conflict between each other, and as such no longer have a need to fight amongst themselves. Jealousy was the real motivator, and without that it allows them to bond. Again, if you look at these red pill communities, you see the same camaraderie over the hatred and subjugation of women. I mean, they're not attracting any women anyway, so all they have left to do is talk shit with other losers. Ken behaves like a scorned lover to Barbie, trying to win the breakup by showing how successful he's been at dismantling society. And he's especially vicious to Barbie, pinning this end result on her refusal to accept his romantic advances. We can clearly see that he's hurt, and his aggressive actions towards Barbie further pushes him into a hollow and dark place. He doesn't want to be mean to her, he just wants to be with her. But at this point, he doesn't know how else to fulfill his life goals. So in his mind, he might as well supplement them with external interests. And if Barbie feels compelled, read forced, to reciprocate his feelings, then all the better for him. This is obviously the wrong way to go about being in a relationship with someone, but the system has failed him. They've convinced him that demeaning women and hoarding power without taking responsibility is the best way to cope. But that's not really how patriarchy works, especially for simplifying things like in Barbie Land. We are always under the pressures and structures of patriarchy, and therefore every man, no matter how good and aware of his actions, is always benefiting and participating in the subjugation of women. It's very similar to white privilege. I didn't personally colonize the United States. I didn't own slaves. My grandparents immigrated here in the 20th century, but that doesn't change the fact that I benefit from the privileges of my skin tone. I live on land that was taken from Native American tribes. I don't have to worry about my behavior around the police. I am just more likely to be hired, trusted, and given power for no reason but the color of my skin. I can support anti-racist causes and fight for racial equality, but there's no changing the fact that I benefit from it every day just by existing.
There are no multiples of Alan. He's just Alan.
Yeah, I'm confused about that.
I think there's an argument to be made that Alan is non-binary. They don't identify with Barbie or Ken in a sexual or gender identification way. Barbie is so dedicated to the idea of this gender binary that I think Alan is non-binary as a matter of principle. They have no personal stake in the gender dynamic of the Barbies, but at the same time they do recognize the clear threat that the Kens present with patriarchy. It's something that, if the Kens are truly motivated, could end up affecting them and other non-binary people as well. If Alan feels like they are threatened to assimilate to the male-dominated hierarchy, then it's also in their benefit to help the Barbies overthrow the tyrannical rule of Ken. I also think that Alan is ace because they don't engage in gender politics. The socialization of fighting other Kens or pining after Barbies as objects never really reached or affected them. They don't partake in the aggressive posturing, flirting, or the other gender traits of Kens, and they also don't totally align with the Barbies either. Both are friendly to each other, and they're willing to help out the Barbies in their time of need, but Alan says throughout the movie that they don't really belong in Barbie Land. Barbie Land is a very heteronormative movie, even though half of the population has no romantic interest in the other, earring magic and sugar daddy Ken aside. I mean, I love them. They're queer icons and they're fabulous. But Alan isn't interested in Kens either. They're just there, putting up with both sides.
Oh, okay.
Sublime!
Barbie overthrows the Kens by giving them exactly what they think they want. It's not the patriarchy, even though they had fun with that kind of power. Patriarchy can force women to work for men, it can force them to be objects of desire and not act with autonomy if their safety is threatened. But it can't magically convince women to love you. And that's what the Kens want. They want to be loved by the Barbies. They want the Barbies to feel the same way about the Kens that they feel about Barbie. It fulfills the objective given to them by the structures they live under. When Barbie convinces Ken that she wants to be his long-distance, low-commitment, casual girlfriend, he has fulfilled his reason for living. So much so that he no longer feels the need to fight with the other Kens at all. The insecurities of not being enough for Barbie are washed away because she has convinced him that he's enough for her. This is obviously a lie. Ken is a dangerous, tyrannical, and stupendously ignorant person. I say ignorant because if he knew exactly what he was doing, then he would literally be evil. But he's not evil, not really. He's using evil methods to get what he's been told he wants. But Ken didn't just wake up one morning after having no purpose in life and decided on his own volition to burn Barbie Land to the ground to be with Barbie. He didn't decide it was Barbie and Ken, and it's an impossible task to complete because it either assures that Barbie wants to be with Ken, which isn't true, or it means that Ken has to remove her autonomy in order to succeed. That's what's so frustrating about trying to get men to understand the concepts of patriarchy and how to combat it with feminism. A lot of the time, they don't understand that the reason they feel pressured and boxed into being the strongest, smartest, and having the most attractive partner is also the reason why women are objectified and attacked and forced to be subservient. It's the patriarchy's fault for both. That's not to say that men don't deserve to be criticized and held accountable for their actions. You're damn right if you enact violence towards women in any form because of their gender that you're a piece of shit, but it's not entirely your fault. The structures that we live under socialize you to act like that. It's very hard to empathize with that kind of abuse and violence, and I understand why many women don't. But I don't think the issue will be solved if we don't also acknowledge that perspective when trying to burn down the patriarchy. Barbie's plan to take Ken's power away from him is centered around giving him exactly what he wants, and then attacking his deepest insecurities. Ken's second reason for living after being with Barbie is to be the best Ken. That's how he tries to get Barbie's attention. He's the best surfer, the best dancer, the best singer, the best whatever it is, as long as it's better than the other Kens. So when Barbie begins to talk and flirt with the other Kens, their whole world shatters in front of their eyes. They can't be the best Ken if Barbie is talking with another Ken. That would mean that that other Ken is worth talking to, and is maybe better to talk to. And that would mean that Ken isn't good enough for Barbie. And if Ken isn't good enough for Barbie, then it will never be Barbie and Ken. And if it can't be Barbie and Ken, then there's no reason to live anymore. There's no other goal given to Ken, so even after winning Barbie's love by forcing her with patriarchy, he still can't have her, and that means nothing will work. The only thing left to do is to eliminate the other Ken, so that Barbie will have no choice but to be with Ken. This blind act of aggression and rage is fueled by the insecurities that came with Ken in the box. Ken must be good at doing things, better than other Kens, and Ken must be with Barbie. And if he's not, the end result is all-out warfare. Well, it starts out as warfare, but gosh darn it, these Kens really just communicate through song and dance. During the Ken's musical number, they finally admit to their internal struggles in a way we haven't seen so far. This level of introspection is the first step into recognizing how patriarchy has benefited and damaged men on an individual level. In Ken's case, he finally comes to the realization that his self-worth isn't based off of whether Barbie likes him or not. He's just Ken, and that's enough to be valued and worthy in life. The whole reason Ken was driven to the patriarchy in the first place was because he didn't feel like he was wanted or cared for by Barbie. This isn't Barbie's fault. She doesn't have to care about him. Ken is reckoning with what society has told him to equate his self-worth with. Once he's able to break free from this social structure, he can let go of the need to have a partner. This in turn allows him to view the other Kens as individuals that are also struggling with self-realization and respect. There's no need to be violent towards other Kens if you're secure in your own masculinity. And you don't have to conflate your own self-worth with the patriarchal standards of masculinity either. You can be yourself and identify as a man, and that can be enough. It's much harder to do this than it is to parrot conservative talking points to get a Planet Fitness membership. To accept yourself for who you are and strive to be the best you can genuinely be is a difficult task to do. It takes emotional vulnerability, introspection, and a rejection of what society is telling you to be. The Kens bond over this realization, and it allows them to connect in a way that they never could when they saw each other as adversaries. When you remove the competition for gender performance from the equation, it allows everyone to succeed. People aren't rewarded for performing gender in a certain way, and others aren't attacked for deviating from the norm, especially if it's not their fault. Tangent time. After rewatching the movie, this messaging is also very apparent in the Barbie's view of feminism. They look down on ugly Barbie because she's not like the others. Through no fault of her own, ugly Barbie is outcast, ignored by Barbie society, and continually reminded of her differences. She doesn't seem to mind so much, as she's accepted her role in society, but what kind of society has Barbie created if they're going to criticize one of their own for being different from everyone else? Especially in a movie that includes trans, plus size, and disability Barbies without question. The only reason a Barbie wouldn't fit in with Barbie Land is if they didn't want to participate in the culture. It doesn't matter how inclusive your society is. The act of judging others because of their differences is bad, even if they don't care to participate.
Is it just my imagination or that these Mojo Dojo Casa houses just get dreamier?
That's because they're dream houses, mother.
After a climactic dance number, the Kens return to the dream house to find that the Barbies have legislated all power back away from them. I say back because it's pointed out that the Kens never held any public office or legislative power in Barbie Land. Ken makes a final attempt after this exhausting journey to be with Barbie, and she rejects him, which is absolutely the correct move. I mean, who in their right mind would choose to be with the person who literally enslaved your entire gender, right? As a result, Ken has a full breakdown and identity crisis. He finally understands that Barbie does not have to be with him if she doesn't want to, and that's okay. You don't have to achieve the goals given to you by society, especially if they come at the cost of someone else's autonomy. But this leaves Ken with the question of what is he here for? Why does he exist? The same question that Barbie herself has been grappling with for the entire movie, Ken finally arrives at. And what's the answer to that question, you might ask? I don't know. Yeah, that's right. I spent 20 minutes praising the message of this movie, and now it's turned into a critique. So here's the thing. Ken's plot isn't wrapped up. Like at all. His understanding that it's not Barbie and Ken anymore, it's just Ken, leaves him to go out on his own journey to discover himself. And that's kind of cute. Yeah, Ken, go ahead. You can go find what you're passionate about. Maybe start a ranch somewhere where you and the other Kens can raise horses. That would be a fine ending to a character looking for a new purpose in life. But it's not a satisfying ending for a movie entrenched in gender politics. We spend the vast majority of the movie showing the absolute villainy that the Kens can cause with the help of the patriarchy. But the answer to how do we end the patriarchy isn't, well, stop forcing people to love you and get a hobby. There's a much deeper and insidious problem that needs a more thought out answer. Feminism isn't about removing the concept of gender and sexuality from society as a whole without explaining how to do that. It's about working together to build a society that is equitable to everyone. And in a movie that removes all racial and socioeconomic inequality, that should make things a lot simpler. Feminism also isn't about making women apologize for making men feel bad for doing bad things. The fact that the Barbies apologize to the Kens for manipulating them and the Kens don't apologize for literally enslaving the Barbies is mind-boggling. Like, how'd you guys miss that one? No. By the end of the movie, I personally saw that Barbie Land was a solid blueprint to build an equitable society, but nothing ever happens to forward that message. Barbie, TM, says that she's not interested in making Barbie Land a better place and decides to go to the real world instead. You know, the real world, which is run by the patriarchy and will attack and demoralize her constantly for the rest of her life. And I'm not even really bothered by that. That's showing full autonomy on her part, and I completely empathize with someone who needs to follow their own path, even if it means they'll leave behind everything else they've ever known. The Barbies regain total control of Barbie Land, which is great. Clearly the Barbies are more humane and sensible than the Kens, but the point of the story should be to create change in the environment and the characters that live in it. Putting Barbie Land back the way it was doesn't address that Barbie Land wasn't perfect to begin with. Just because the Kens had full autonomy over their lives doesn't mean that they should have been barred from any form of leadership or decision making in their home. They even make a joke to that extent, where the Kens ask if they can have a seat on the Supreme Court and the Barbies laugh and literally say maybe a seat on the lower district court and one day you can work your way up to having a Supreme Court seat. Yes, I understand the Kens have just performed inexcusable acts of prejudice and violence towards the Barbies. It's fucked up. They need to be held accountable for their actions and educated on why it's vicious and inexcusable. But not giving people the right to take part in governing themselves, even if you are an ideal form of leadership, isn't true autonomy. The Kens have different lived experiences from the Barbies that were forced upon them by society, and they faced issues that were not being heard or were actively being ignored during the beginning of the movie. And if it had been truly an equal society, those concerns might have been voiced in a more measured way, and they could have all avoided this revolt. To ignore that message in place of, well, everything seemed great when the Barbies were in charge, and women have never been in charge like that before, and the Kens were allowed to do anything they wanted, so they had full autonomy. Ignores the responsibility that the ruling class has to its people. There's no question that Barbie Land is a better place than the real world, but it's not a perfect one, and the refusal to recognize that in the face of power and autonomy, especially when one hasn't felt that sense of liberation before, is in itself perpetuating inequality.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbie. Thank you.
Barbie is a wonderful, beautiful, and powerful piece of art that should be watched, studied, and learned from. It's not perfect, but it does a better job at revealing the depth and pervasiveness of patriarchy than any other media that has come before it. While it's a rather introductory foray into feminism for women, it presents some powerful and meaningful insights into how men interact with and suffer from living in a patriarchal society. Though it may seem like men benefit unilaterally from a societal structure that allows them to weaponize gender and subjugate others for personal gain, they're also beholden to the status symbols that they created. Such a rigid and punishing system of community hurts everyone involved, even those that have the most to gain from keeping the status quo. The outcry from these male film critics against the very movement that seeks to liberate them from their own chains is misguided and uneducated. When you get hack comedians standing up on stage and telling the crowd to shut up because they made a bad joke about a movie that's actually important, you know that something has gone terribly wrong. Joe Coy can blame the tight deadlines and his other writers all he wants, but at the end of the day, he failed to understand what this movie was about, and that inherently makes him a terrible critic. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that people are calling him on it. It's not like you couldn't make fun of the Barbie movie. Like, you can make jokes about Barbie. It's just they have to be good and not hack, you know? Like, yeah, dude, it's all about boobies. Like, what? What are you even talking about at that point? If that's the only thing you took away from that movie, like, I don't even know where to begin with you. That's crazy. That's crazy talk right there. Yeah, what the actual hell? And honestly, what a bitch ass move to tell the audience to shut up. Oh my god, such an entitled man take. Yeah, shut up, I didn't have any time. Wow, seriously though, what a pathetic move. Nothing gets the audience on your side by telling them that they're stupid and they don't understand the jokes that you're making. No, I swear these were good jokes. You're laughing at my jokes are the funny ones. Well, now everybody's laughing at you because you look like a sexist idiot. Ken doesn't excel under patriarchy. He still suffers from the same afflictions that are caused by heteronormativity and gendered hierarchy. His only moment of true escape, or presumed escape, since we don't actually get to see it, is when he walks away from the norms that have been pushed onto him and the other characters. This rejection of gender as a valuable or even important trait for people is true freedom, and that's what we should be striving for. We're not going to get there by simply ignoring gender, though you could totally start asking people for their pronouns when you meet them, and not assume their sexuality, and generally refer to people in non-gendered terms when you're unsure. That would be a great start, but the movement to create gender equality means talking about gender a lot, calling out the systems of power that focus on gender to give privileges to some, and including everyone in the conversation to remove prejudice. At this point, Barbie isn't about boobies. It's not about cellulose or Ryan Gosling's abs. It's a representation of the gender dynamic as we see it, and it can either perpetuate or challenge those social norms. I hope that was clear enough, Joe. Now hire some better writers and stop telling people to shut up. Yikes, man. Thank you for watching this video. It's about time we started getting some better analysis from men on important movies that center the female experience, and I'm glad to join that conversation. The more educated and diverse perspectives we can have on media analysis, the better, says the cis white guy. Now go watch some Khadija Mbo or Ali Sumvia to balance it out. If you want to see me talk more about movies, you can check out this video over here, and definitely get subscribed for more. I'll see you in the next one. Okay. Jesus fucking Christ. Calm down, dude. Get it out. Get it out. Get it out. Time to drink more water. We're in a good mood. This is great. I really hope this translates, man. Okay. All right. Damn, dude. Wow. There's a queer difference between the emotional labor men extend to their friends compared to women.